Hi, Terrestriazi coach and hypnotherapist. Okay, so today's video is a continuation. It's part 2 of a video that I recorded yesterday. So if you haven't watched that video yet, definitely do that. That video, part 1, talks about my journey. It talks about how I overcame depression, anxiety, panic attacks, self-worth issues, and got to the place I'm at today. And so in that video, I talk about a handful of things that I implemented, including taking a look at my diet and nutritional changes and a variety of other mindset stuff. So watch that video, but today, again, it's a continuation. So I want to talk about some other things that not only I did then, but that I continue to do every single day in my life, okay? So the next thing that comes to mind that I do, and I did back then, and I recommend my clients do, is I took a look at the people in my life, okay? So I started to kind of take inventory into the people in my life, and this could be close people, this could be friends, family, coworkers, whoever, but I encourage you to do the same and take a look. These people in my life, are they supportive? Are they encouraging? Are they in my corner? Are they proud of my growth? Are they encouraging of my growth? Or are they toxic? Are they toxic? Are they negative? Are they maybe staying stagnant in their own growth and their own life? Because that's tough. That's tough. If they're staying stagnant and then I'm over here and I'm trying to feel better and I'm immersing myself in opportunities to feel better and they're staying here, sometimes there's a disconnect. And sometimes, not that I was ever in a place of judgment, because I believe that everybody's kind of where they're at, but sometimes there's a disconnect. And sometimes people are very uncomfortable when you start to grow and they start to try and pull you back in. So I had to take a look at the people in my life and make sure that my circle were the supporters, were the cheerleaders, were the healthy relationships that I needed in order for me to feel better. So I encourage you to do the same thing. In addition to that, I started immersing myself completely with those people or content or whatever it may have been that were encouraging. Okay, so it could have looked like I was listening and immersing myself in every single audiobook that you could think of, or podcast, or TED Talk, or YouTube video, or I don't care if it's Instagram followers, or whatever resonates with you, but finding a mentor, finding inspiration, finding stories, things that are going to enlighten you, things that are going to encourage you is crucial. Okay, you want to believe that it's possible. And so immersing yourself in those opportunities is huge. Okay, so that was another huge part of my growth, was I dived into all of the content that I could and just devoured every book I could, every audio I could, and that helped a ton. Okay, what else did I do? In regards to my anxiety, so as I mentioned in this last video, my anxiety was huge. I couldn't go to the bus stop to get my stepson because, well, I could, but I would have to take anti-anxiety drugs to do it, right? So in the video, I also talk about this concept of these small changes, these small things, these baby steps, okay? So for me with my anxiety, one of those baby steps looked like I was challenging myself to do things outside my comfort zone. And at this point in my life, everything was outside my comfort zone. So I did it a lot. And so one of those things that I did, I remember was, and this was back before cell phones were really common, I would ask people what time it was. Okay, so I would just be at a park and I would just ask somebody what time it was. And to other people, you might look at that and go, it's not a big deal. Why would that be scary in any way? But to me at the time, when it was so extreme and took over my entire life, that was a big deal. Okay, so for you, your big feats might not feel big to other people, but challenge yourself. Challenge yourself, challenge yourself every single day. I still challenge myself. I still challenge myself every single day. In fact, I was recently traveling and my husband and kids, they went back up to the room, or they went to the pool, right? They went to the pool and then went back up to the room. And I said, I want to go have a cocktail, and I'm gonna go sit at this bar and go have a cocktail. And if you know me, you probably know that I'm super introverted, right? And I look at this bar and I see only men there. And I was the only woman at the bar. And because I'm such an introvert, it was definitely outside my comfort zone, right? But I did it because I wanted to, right? So sometimes I had to ignore that that fear, right, that comes up, and do it anyway. That mantra of feel the fear and do it anyway. And so that's what I did, right? And so I continue every single day. And to other people, they might go, oh, I sit at the bar all the time. That's not a big deal, right? But to me, it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me to do that, but I did it. And I was proud of myself for doing that. And that's when the most growth comes, is when you can do something despite that fear, okay? Okay, so what else did I do? Belief was huge. Belief, hope, that was huge. So I truly, truly, truly had to start believing that I could feel better, okay? And so when you're depressed, that's hard. That's really, really, really hard. And in fact, I had this mantra that I told myself every day, and I didn't know how impactful this would be in a negative way, but I would tell myself every day, I am so unhappy. It's so hard for me to be happy, but it's easy for everybody else. And I told myself that every day because I couldn't understand how people were happy. It just didn't make sense to me. So every day I would tell myself, it's so hard to be happy, okay? And so our subconscious interprets and believes and processes whatever we say and whatever we imagine as truth. And it's really definitive and it's really black and white. So if I'm telling myself every day it's so hard to be happy, my subconscious cannot allow me to kind of navigate and figure out solutions to happiness because, again, it's black and white. It just accepts whatever that suggestion is. And so I had to work around a lot of reframing, and I had to work around belief. And that was probably the biggest thing that that has changed in my life. Was right now, if there's not something in my life that I'm happy with, I know I have the power to shift that. Period. Back then I didn't. And so it's not to say I'm not hit with things in my life right now, but I have developed a level of resilience. I have the tools in my toolkit, and I know that I'm capable of navigating and finding solutions to whatever it is. Not to say it's always easy, but that belief has changed, okay? That belief to know that it's within my control. Back then I didn't believe that. So I had to work on belief, and I had to work on hope. I had to work on that a lot, okay? Okay, oh, this is another thing. So I begun to focus in on my strengths as opposed to my weaknesses. Okay, so let me give you an example. I know I just mentioned that, that I'm an introvert, okay? So I used to have this story that I was unlikable. I used to have a story that I was introverted, therefore I was more quiet, therefore I was unlikable. And I would compare myself to other people and I would see, oh my gosh, this bubbly personality, type people that would kind of enter a room and people would flock to because they were really out there and really outgoing and really charismatic and really likable. And for me, I thought, oh my gosh, that's not who I am. I can't do that, right? So I began to emphasize my strengths. Yes, I'm an introvert. And yes, I'm good enough. And yes, I have my own qualities. And what are those qualities? So one of those qualities for an introvert, for example, is that I can get clients in my office and they can open up so comfortably, like we've known each other for years, and they can share things with me that they've never shared with anyone before, right? So for me, I had to understand that even though I was different in some ways, I still had my strengths. And even though I was different, that certainly didn't equate to me not being good enough, okay? So I encourage you to do the same thing. So we can spend all day reflecting on how we're not good enough and how we compare ourselves to other people and maybe what they're offering that we don't offer or what they have that we don't have, but begin to reflect on what you do have. What are your strengths? What are you proud of? Okay, so that was another thing that I did as well. So I'm just taking a look at my notes to make sure that I cover everything because there's so many things that I thought of immediately after that first video. Okay, another thing that I did was I stopped attaching myself. This kind of goes hand in hand with the thought a couple minutes ago. I stopped attaching myself to labels. Okay, so again, I talked about how I told myself I'm so unhappy, it's so hard to be happy. I also stopped saying I'm depressed. I'm so depressed. I have depression. It's not to say that the depression wasn't there and that there is some value to understanding it. Of course there is. But for me, I had to unattach myself to that label. Okay? I had to stop saying this is who I am. if I wanted to change that at some point. Okay, so that's another thing that I did. I also used to be really codependent, okay? And if you are a people pleaser, if you struggle with self-worth issues, if you don't feel worthy and good enough in your life, chances are you probably struggle with some form of codependency as well. And so I always felt like I was walking on eggshells and that I was in charge of the way that everybody else felt, and I never spoke my mind. And so I begun to work on that as well. I begun to understand the value in using my voice, the importance in using my voice, and I really worked on effective communication, okay? And it wasn't easy. There was times where I spoke up where my voice would be shaking, where I was terrified to do it, but I still did it, okay? So I encourage you to start taking a look as well at possible codependency issues in your relationships in your life, and also encouraging you to start using your voice and speaking your mind even when it's scary to do that, okay? And I remember again, small ways. I remember once I went out to eat dinner with my husband, and he's the opposite, and he had no problem at this point in his life speaking up, and I don't think he ever has. But I did at this point in my life. And I think it was a special occasion. It might have been his birthday or something like that. And he ordered a steak, and his steak was cooked wrong. And normally I would have said, oh, I'm not going to say anything. I mean, I would eat the wrong food before I say anything, right? But because this was a special occasion, I decided, you know what? I'm going to say something. And again, small thing. I spoke up. I told the waiter, his steak was cooked wrong. No big deal. She went and fixed it. He ate his meal. Not a big deal. But that small little thing allowed me to feel more confident, allowed me to realize, oh my gosh, the world's still spinning. It is. And that felt really good. It felt really empowering to speak up. Okay, so sometimes it's really, really small things that start to encourage such huge growth within ourselves. Okay, so I encourage you to really work on finding your voice, as hard as it might be at times, because if you have anxiety, if you're not feeling worthy, it's hard to find your voice. So I encourage you to do that and to start speaking up. Okay, even if that opinion is even if other people aren't agreeing with that opinion or unpopular, doesn't matter. Start using your voice, and you're gonna find such confidence and empowerment within that. Okay, so the last thing I'm gonna talk about today that I did is I started to invest in myself. Okay, so I know the other day I talked about this bubble bath story about how I would in the past pour a bubble bath, and this was just like a metaphor of how I lived my life. And I would feel almost guilty, like, oh, I'm using too much bubble bath. I'm not worth that much bubble bath. But I lived my life thinking that same thing. I remember there's a point in my life where I first had my kids, and I remember I was shopping, and I got all of these things for my kids, all of these clothes and all of these back to school things, and I had no problem doing that. And I was racking up, on the register, and I had one small shirt or a dress for myself that I was getting. And I remember thinking, oh no, I'm gonna put this back, right? And so it's again, I felt unworthy of the extra bubbles, unworthy of that nice dress. And so I started to invest in myself. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be time consuming. It could be small things, but I started to do it. So if that meant painting my nails, great, I did it. If that meant reading a book or taking that bubble bath, or not only time that I started to invest in myself, but I started to also invest money into myself. So it could be that I took courses, or I was going to school, or I was learning new things. Whatever it was, but I started to recognize that I was worthy and I was a priority. And at some point, you have to invest in yourself. And so for me, I invested in my happiness. I invested in me feeling better. I invested in my hobbies, my goals, my visions, and it was non-negotiable. Okay? It has to be non-negotiable, because if there's things out there, when you're struggling with depression, if there's things out there that are going to make you feel better, then it has to be non-negotiable. And for me, it became non-negotiable. Okay? All right. Thank you so much for watching today. Of course, as always, I love feedback. So if you have extra things to add to this conversation, maybe there's things that you've done in your life, I want to hear from those, as well as if what value you found from this video as well. If maybe you're struggling a little bit, let me know how I can support you. And if you haven't watched that video from yesterday, I will link that below. Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys.